All right, well, I might kick off. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Community Roundtable. My name's Kate Symons. I'm the Chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on all of the lands we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to acknowledge the connection that Indigenous Australians hold to country and culture, particularly at this time of great uncertainty. I'd like to welcome you to today's roundtable and thank you for attending. I know how busy everyone is at the moment, so I appreciate the time you've taken at such short notice. I'd also like to acknowledge the personal circumstances we're all working within at the moment. Some of us are negotiating caring responsibilities. You may see my two sons running behind me at any point in time, so excuse that if you do. And all of us are finding a new way to navigate a new normal. I understand that some of our team members listened to a Thriving Communities Partnership webinar yesterday with Kira Sterling, who's here today. Hi, Kira. And she was talking about the coronavirus pandemic having an impact on every single one of us, and I think it's important to acknowledge that first and foremost. I'll flag some tips for the technology we're using today, and as I said, this is not my forte, so please bear with me. Please note we're recording today's session, so we're able to share the insights across our teams to inform our work. We'll also be writing up the key themes from today's discussion to share externally. Jess and Kat from the Commission will be helping facilitate today's meeting. If you have any questions or observations while someone else is talking, please type them in the Zoom text chat function, and Kat will make sure it gets shared with the group. And Jess will be sharing her screen with everyone to take some notes and capture key insights, which you'll be able to see in real time. So can I just suggest, and actually I'll do this at the same time, if you have the chat bar open at the bottom of your screen and the participants, so if you press on the chat bar on the bottom, it'll come up on the right hand corner, that's right, and the participants also, if you click that participants bar as well, you can see the participants, and then you can use the raise hand or lower hand and any comments through that mechanism there. So hopefully that all works for everyone, but give a yell if you need some help. Also, and most of you have done this already, please keep your microphone muted if possible when you're not speaking to avoid feedback and background noise. So welcome, we have a number of participants and observers today, and I'll take a moment to introduce and welcome everyone. And we're all here to listen today, and of course it's open to anyone to ask or raise issues. But we're very particularly interested today to hear directly from community and small business groups. So from the community sector, we have the Ombudsman, Cynthia Gabert, and Zach Gillam from the Energy and Water Ombudsman Victoria. Welcome. We have Lauren Solomon and Emma O'Neill from the Consumer Policy Research Centre. We have Damien Sullivan and David Bryant from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, and I understand, Damien, you might have to go early, and that's absolutely fine. Gavin Duffy from St Vincent de Paul, Brooke McHale and Jared Len from Victorian Council of Social Service, Kira Sterling from Thriving Communities Partnership, Jared Brody and Jake Lilly from the Consumer Action Law Centre, Sandy Ross and Lynn Dundon from Financial Counselling Victoria, Carolyn Bond from the Economic Abuse Reference Group, and representing small business, Hugh Horsfall from the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we have a number of observers, but please feel free to participate as you need to as well. Sarah Proudfoot from the Australian Energy Regulator, Nathan Crombie, Rod Curtis and Helen Vaughan, I think will join us later, from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Daniel Wilson-Otto, Mel Mangalini and Alicia Krause from the Department of Treasury and Finance. And Commission staff, I'm joined by my fellow Commissioners, Simon Corden, Satish Bajani and Rebecca Billings. Our CEO, John Hamill, is with us. Members of our executive team, Marcus Crudden, Sarah McDowell and Michelle Bryan. Jess and Kat, our leads on vulnerability policy research and engagement, and their project manager, Lucy Weston. And I think there's a number of other Commission staff who are also online, so welcome everybody. Now to the agenda for today. I'm going to provide just a short introduction, and following that we'll have about a 40 or 45 minute session to give organisations an opportunity to provide an update of about 2 or 3 minutes each to provide some reflections on current challenges and the effects of the pandemic. After that, we'll have about the same time of about 40 minutes I'll guide a discussion on key topics and questions. We've got some questions in mind, but I'm sure that all of you do as well, so I'll be open to having any dialogue that you wish to have at that point. I'll then wrap up the session and we'll hold a discussion regarding future engagement. So just a few words to kick us off. The corona crisis is creating significant challenges for many consumers and the community services that support them. We know the current crisis is likely to exacerbate existing vulnerabilities and create new ones, and this will be felt in both the short and the long term. We as a Commission are committed to ensuring the voices of consumers, particularly those experiencing vulnerability, inform our decision making. And this is a real opportunity for all of Commission and all of Commissioners who are the decision makers to hear directly from you. I'd like to touch on the purpose of today's roundtable. Today is not about us talking, although I've done a lot of that so far, but I won't going forward. But this is about us listening to you. At this critical time, we want to understand the issues that are affecting consumers now and what you anticipate we will be seeing in the future. We want to know what the current and urgent priorities are from your perspective. We're entering today's discussion in the spirit of collaboration, and we want to hear your insights about what's happening on the ground right now for consumers and community services. As the crisis unfolds, we want to ensure we're hearing the frontline experiences of community workers and consumers, both residential and small business, and we will also be active in other discussions and forums to ensure we're as closely connected as possible to what's happening on the ground. So what we would like you to tell us about the practical implications for consumers during the coronavirus crisis. And what about our response? Well, we are the independent regulator. However, we still need to be aware of all of the policy work that's going on behind the scenes in government to respond to this crisis, so we can ensure that consistent messaging. And the last thing we need to do right now is to create more confusion for consumers. So I've been very conscious of a role that we've got to play, but also that consistent messaging if possible. And while there's urgency required in our responses right now, we're also aware that our short-term responses can have long-term consequences. So while we want to act fast and be responsive, we also want to act from a considered position. And that means having as much information as we can about the experiences of consumers so that we can make robust and sustainable decisions. The information you share with us today and over the coming weeks and months, hopefully, will allow us to not only understand the experiences of consumers, but gives us the ability to respond as needs arise and be nimble enough to adapt to the unfolding situation. So I hope that this meeting will be the first in a series with you as this crisis unfolds. And towards the end of the roundtable today and the discussion, I'd like to speak with you about how best we continue this engagement on a more regular basis. So on that note, I'd like to now move to the next part of today's discussion, which is an update from community organisations. And we're very fortunate to have representatives from 10 organisations here today. And so for the next sort of 40 minutes or so, what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity one by one to provide an update of around 2 or 3 minutes each. Just some reflections on what you've been experiencing, seeing in your work with your consumers and small businesses in the community, and the effect generally on our community. I have a list of entities here and I will just take them one at a time, and if you'd like to share your reflections, that would be fabulous, and then we'll get to the questions and the core discussion after that. I might kick off with eWolf, if that's all right. So from eWolf we have Cynthia and Zach Gillen. So I'm just wondering if you have a couple of minutes worth of reflections that if you'd like to share anything at all you'd like to, Cynthia or Zach.
I'm going to let Zach go.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Sure. Hi, look, we've been providing briefings to a few entities, ESC included, the Minister's Office, DELT, for the last couple of weeks, just on what we've been seeing. So I'll just run through what we've summarised in those briefings. We've essentially picked the 16th of March as kind of ground zero for the COVID-19 period, and we're tracking a few data sets from that point. That's the date on which the restrictions on gatherings of 500 people kicked in. So it's just a particular date we've chosen. what we've found since that time is that actually call numbers for us have been very low. They've been lower than usual since that point. So it's sort of a strange calm before the storm moment for us. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, Zach.
You can hear me? You can
Yes.
see me? I can't see anyone, so I'm just going to assume you can all see and hear me still. Yeah, so it's a weird calm before the storm moment. We're certainly anticipating a lot of impacts related to financial hardship, but we're not seeing them yet. We're also tracking calls that are coming through where people are mentioning COVID-19 in their statements to us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Zach.
Yeah. And the last week, about 14% of our cases mentioned COVID-19 in our contact to us. The highest proportion we had in any one day was 22%. So again, we're expecting that number to rise, but for now it is a little bit the calm before the storm. But I should add, we're still seeing cases of disconnection, which is disappointing, and cases where it appears the PDF isn't being applied as it should be, and the delay in ERGs for people is a huge problem.
Thanks very much, Zach. That was a really interesting snapshot of the challenges that EWOV are seeing at the moment. Thank you for that. I might move now to Consumer Policy Research Centre. Lauren and Emma, I think you're here with us today. Would someone like to make a few words?
I might make a few, Kate, thanks for having us, and then hand over to Emma as well. So obviously our primary focus at the moment is how we can contribute consumer research to policymakers and regulators trying to solve the challenges ahead. What we're thinking through is a project at the moment that looks at the different phases of this crisis and the appropriate responses by regulators and policymakers during that time. We will be kicking off some consumer research, both Victoria and nationally, between May and November, so that we can better track consumer experiences across markets and I guess their challenges that they're having, both in accessing support but also accessing just supply. I guess, you know, the key point for us is having a process to feed through that information to policy makers and regulators on a monthly basis to inform the response, and also for it to be combined with other data that's being collected by other agencies, obviously like EWOV, and obviously we're talking to Consumer Affairs Victoria too about what they're seeing come through their call centres. So really for us, we're still focusing around consumer wellbeing and welfare throughout this year, also looking at data and technology given the huge reliance on digital services that everyone finds themselves now in. The other aspect I'd just like to touch on is obviously our Energy Simplified program. So that program is led by Carl Barrett in our organisation and has specifically been designed to manage energy costs, both usage and also the offers and access to concessions. So from our perspective, it's important that not only does the government and regulators make good decisions in providing additional support for consumers, it's important to make sure that consumers actually know that support exists, otherwise they're not going to be connected up to it in the most effective or efficient way. They're probably the top line things, and I'm just conscious, Emma, in terms of your report around consumer vulnerability, you've been thinking a lot about kind of the existing vulnerabilities that obviously will be expanded, and potentially new vulnerabilities that are being introduced as a result of the shifts in the economy that we're seeing. Did you want to touch on that just briefly?
Emma, you're still muted. You might just want to check that.
Hello, Emma.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, just to briefly build on what Lauren mentioned, we'll be expanding, I guess, on the report that we recently provided to the AER around vulnerabilities in that sector. So looking at the vulnerabilities that are being amplified by COVID-19, and also the emerging risks. including, in industries that are highly exposed, but a number of other risks. That report we will put out will include an Australian and international audit of relevant policy measures. Lauren's mentioned the original research we'll be doing, which will be a tracking of consumer experiences, but just also to touch on another survey we will have coming out over the next few months on consumers' experiences of data and technology, and that will include some insights on COVID-19. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Lauren and Emma. Might move to the Brotherhood of St Lawrence. I think we've got Damien Sullivan and David Bryant.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everyone. So for us, through our programs, we don't do emergency assistance as such, but we are seeing a higher demand with people off work and significantly reduced work hours. And we see that there's likely to be an increase as the rental stress situation comes up as well. So our employment programs are seeing people coming back they've placed people previously and who now don't have their jobs anymore, or whose hours have been cut significantly. We're very concerned about the situation in relation to people we're working with who are seeking asylum and other non-residents there's been a lot of useful initiatives around job seeker and job keeper payments, but they aren't eligible for those initiatives. So that's quite problematic and an area of concern. Also people who are perhaps digitally not involved online in the isolation and access to services and the like. In relation to energy more specifically, we very much welcome what the ESC's done and the AER thus far. We are very concerned about, during the lock-in period, the likelihood that people will be very cold in their homes, many people who are already facing energy poverty, and what can be done about that, either much higher bills people receiving or going very cold. Initial calculations we've got are around $700 to $2,000 for extra heating over that winter period, very ballpark figures. And we've noticed that Gemina's got some data that they've put out that says consumption for residential is increasing as well. And to that end, we've just done a joint letter with a number of other groups calling for a temporary increase in energy concessions or an energy supplement, and a one-off ERGS payment, as well as including people seeking asylum on bridging visas in those concessions as well. And we would also see some role for some programmatic interventions as well. I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much, Damien. Can we move to St Vincent de Paul? Gavin, you're with us today?
When I unmute, I am. Thanks, Kate, and thanks, hi all. So we've got 3 call centres across Victoria. Our Box Hill call centre, which is where I'm based out, takes about 2,500 calls per week. Similar to others, our volumes are down a lot, but we've had an increase in what I'd call complex cases, or people that were on the margins before that could hide in the margins that can't anymore. So I think this is washing them out. Migrants and refugees, students, backpackers, basically people in the black economy, I suppose is the way you'd put it. Just on that, we've had a phone call today from the Federal Minister for Migrants, Refugees, yada, yada, who I think they might be trying to get together a package for that group, but that's very live at the moment. Other issues that we're people in rooming houses, flats, rough sleepers, and those in fragile relationships, for whatever reason, they seem to be particularly impacted by this. So it's probably living conditions or mental, emotional states as well. We're an outreach. We used to go and do home deliveries, basically outreach model. We're shifting to a drop and go, moving away from vouchers to food. Accessing food is incredibly difficult and expensive at the moment in short supply, so we're trying to work around those supply issues. We had 110 op shops. We've only got 40 open at the moment, so our revenue's drived off, and everybody's had to take a 10% pay cut, and we've laid off people. We'll see how we go through to August. We've taken out a line of credit to keep everybody running at the moment. So we take no government money. So that's how we're managing there. From a utility point of view, things that are percolating up was mentioned before. We're seeing older disconnections come to light. So disconnection warnings or threats of disconnections are starting to come up. People are panicking now and starting to read their mail, is the way I'm looking at it, rather than parking it under the bed or wherever they do it. The lag in ERGs is really not helpful at the moment. That needs to be picked up. And also Lauren picked up before, knowledge about concessions and all the concessions, not just utility concessions, of what people's entitlements to is a problem. On the utility front specifically, there's a working group that's been put together by a few of us. So I suppose it's strategic policy looking. Because there's changes in consumption, SMEs are down, res is up. What that means for the price pass on a revenue cap moving forward means as we get to the other side of this, you might actually see price increases for networks coming through right at the time when you're trying to rebuild the economy. So we're working on ways that you might be able to shift through glide paths and side constraints, network true-ups, and how you don't undermine an economic recovery and start to support that. On top of that, there's issues around, particularly in Victoria, issues around people are self-consuming with solar. I'm one of them. I'm at home, which means my solar injections are understated at the moment. So as the solar rollout goes on, the actual true impact on the network won't be seen until we go back to normal. So you might have a lot of people that are not tripping at the moment because they're self-consuming, but if we go back to normal, and when we go back to normal, there could be some network challenges and issues with that has some other implications associated with it. Two final things, I suppose. Damien's mentioned it. Winter gas loads, very concerned about that. It's been quite mild at the moment. And one thing I really do want to put on everybody's radar, safety. People are at home, multiple people in multiple rooms using appliances, heating appliances particularly, that are dangerous. We will see more fires. We always see fires over winter. We had the monoxide issue, poisoning in public housing. Heaters will be running. So we need to get on top of that. It's always a problem each year, but I think it's going to be exacerbated this year. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks very much, Gavin. Much appreciated. Might flick to Hugh Horsfall from the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Welcome, Hugh.
So I suppose we have really been on the front line of the business response. We've had a huge increase in calls to our helpline and website traffic from our members who are in real distress, both around the future of their businesses and the security of their staff's employment. The focus of concerns and inquiries has really been on workplace relations and managing employment relationships and work from home arrangements and the flexibility needed there. Accessing government stimulus and assistance, both state and federal, and in particular the JobKeeper payment package. And health and safety, so both keeping workers safer at their workplaces or at the office, and people working from home. And I suppose a key focus of our work on stimulus packages has been has the flip side in terms of flowing through to households' employment situation and their ability to pay their bills and their energy security. And I suppose on a lot of that work, we've partnered with Victorian Trades Hall Council in our advocacy to the Federal Treasurer on both the job seeker and the job keeper assistance. Now, in terms of the input that we've been getting from businesses, both to me personally in the policy area and through our workplace relations and membership helplines, I'm not aware of any inquiries or issues relating to energy or energy bills. Really, the key concerns being raised by members with us are around an enormous drop-off in their revenues, and how that they will meet their employment costs, and how they will meet their leasing costs, which are the two biggest expense line items for most businesses. And while we do have a lot of members who are large or intensive energy users, a lot of your small business customers have a similar usage profile to households, and their energy use may only make up a small fraction, 1 or 2% of their turnover, and so understandably they have higher priorities at the moment. But it's not to say that that energy and energy costs and reforms in that space aren't going to be a big part or an important part of the recovery for business, because we see them as a really important area to manage costs for business. And in terms of looking at the stimulus response, it was really pleasing to see the network businesses' response. But note that there hasn't been an energy component to Victoria's stimulus response, unlike in WA, ACT, and the Northern Territory. And then I suppose we're also trying to keep an eye on the future and the recovery for businesses coming out the other side of this, and making sure that all of the really important energy reform work continues to go on, that needs doing anyway, continues to go on in the background, and can be picked up again on the other side of that. And we've been talking to the Minister D'Ambrosio around energy efficiency support for business, which we think is a really important area, and that there's opportunities to build on the Victorian Energy Upgrades program there in terms of assistance for small business, with implementing energy upgrades, as well as, I suppose, an integrated national energy and climate policy. So I'll leave it there.
Great, thanks very much, Hugh. I might move now to Victorian Council of Social Service. Have we got Brooke McHale or Jared Lynn?
Hello, Kate. Hello, everyone. This is Jared Lenny from VCOS. It's a pleasure to see you all.
Hi, Jared.
I want to give plenty of time for those closer to support programs, but I'd just like to endorse the comments so far about the payment difficulty framework obviously being critical, and it relies on consumers having basic familiarity with their rights. So it's really important that we rely on self-help in the consumer protection system, and that we're enabling that as much as possible. I also want to endorse the point about the ERGS process at the other end of the regulatory system. Anything to expedite and perhaps reallocate staff within DHHS might be an option to help move that along, as well as looking at potential winter top-ups or other concessions which Damien flagged. I think that's a good point. Just a general comment, thanks very much for the call today, Kate. It's important that we all share information and coordinate this time, both in the response and the recovery. VCOS is doing that in some other portfolio sectors, and I'm happy to help anyone on the call connect and share across work in that way.
Great, thanks very much, Jared. Thriving Communities Partnership, welcome, Kira.
Hi, thanks, and thanks, Kate, again for pulling this day together. I guess what we're seeing is obviously, and we're all seeing, is a really high demand from a corporate sense. So I think from a community sector sense, the calls, and I know EWOF's been the same, we are actually hearing about probably less calls at the moment, but we anticipate that's because every single person is calling their suppliers and creditors at the moment. We know that banks are seeing 100 years worth of calls in a week, and we've seen the same for energy and water providers. I think 100+% increase in people contacting the corporate organisations regarding their hardship program. And what we also know is that probably means there's a high degree of people that can't get through, and they will, I imagine, then we would start to see the impacts coming more onto the community sector call volumes and impact volumes in the next couple of months, the next month or two, as that It's either people aren't getting through, or whatever interventions they put in place aren't what they anticipated. We are seeing, and I think we've talked about this a bit, a different type of people experiencing vulnerability. So the people experiencing vulnerability as a result of COVID seem to be much quicker and have a different capacity to be able to self-advocate. So we're seeing a much bigger response in people who are accessing support than we probably have normally see statistically for people experiencing vulnerability. Normally we see quite a limited response about people seeking support, and then in this current cohort we've seen a much higher rate of people jumping very quickly to seek that support directly from their providers. Whether they're getting the right support or not will I guess remain to be seen. Again, we're seeing constant issues with concessions, with the people understanding concessions and ERGs, and I think that's going to increase dramatically, and I have grave concerns, as I'm sure many of my colleagues do, around how that is going to be managed, because we already know prior to COVID the response was really not great as far as the timelines. There was some major sort of concerns there with the timelines of how ERGs were being processed and how quickly they were being processed, and we still know that a truckload of people don't understand that they can use their concessions for energy and water. So what are the opportunities? I guess, is there opportunities for government to think differently about how in the past they've never passed the details on to the retailers? Is that something that might shift with the COVID world? We also are seeing, interestingly, having a lot of conversations around the gender side of COVID. So I'm sure someone in this cohort is going to talk about family violence impacts. That's obviously a major issue, but also we're speaking to organisations like the Council of Single Mothers, who are highlighting the fact that predominantly a lot of primary carers are women, and especially those in single parent households. It's dramatically impacting their ability to work from home because they don't necessarily have another partner in the house to rely on. And even when we're seeing two partner households, again, some of the norms, the gender norms that still exist in the world, where women are often the primary carer. So again, when we move to the school term starting up again, there could be a higher, I guess, financial impact to women versus men in that. So it's just an interesting thing that's coming through from our partnership, an interesting, I guess, way to think about what's going on in that relationship at the moment. And again, with our partnership, we're talking a lot about align your responses. Don't try and be the shiniest, try and be the most simple at the moment. And we're also, similar to CPRC, we're looking at some of the research we've done in the past. We've done our disaster research. What insights can we pull from that to see how that actually will fit with some of the COVID stuff as well? So that's kind of where we're at.
Thanks very much, Kira. I think you've raised a number of issues I think that our questions will go to at the end too, so thanks for prompting those. I look forward to more discussion on many of those. Can we move now to Consumer Action Law Centre? I know we've got Gerard and Jake here today. Welcome.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for inviting us along. We can probably share a bit about the call calls we're receiving to the National Debt Helpline. In fact, during the first 3 weeks of March, we had some of our highest calls ever, more than 100 calls a day. But then last week, we actually had a significant reduction in calls to around half the level, in fact. It's hard to know exactly what the reasons are, but I think that, people into that survival mode, worrying about the material things rather than getting on top of their debts is one reason. And that maybe even that some people who have had an increase to their income who just were on New Start with the job seeker payment, not that that's come through yet, but that may influence their behaviour and sort of contacts with us. That said, in terms of the last 2 weeks, around 50% of people that contact us are referencing COVID in the reason they part of the reason they're contacting us. So it's a significant issue. And compare that with bushfires. We're expecting more calls around people affected by bushfires, and they were really small throughout February and March. And COVID is just so much more significant. We have also some of the calls we have received, unfortunately, do indicate some pretty poor actions from energy retailers, including rejecting affordable payment plans, not discussing an ERG, and people still receiving disconnection notices last week. We have been part of a campaign by, I think, the 70 organisations that have joined it, called the Keeping Connected campaign, which has got asks around prohibiting disconnections and restrictions during this time, prohibiting late fees or penalties for non-payment, and pausing external debt collection. Part of that, we recognise that we also don't want to be building up people to be building up accumulated debt that's unaffordable, and think that needs to be a sort of a medium-term policy discussion around how to deal with that. In terms of the response to that campaign, we've been well, it was good to see the EC put out and also the AER. The retailers unfortunately are saying that there must be engagement before they'll give people protection for some of those things, including disconnection protection. And as we know from experience, is that there is high risks of disengagement or people ceasing to engage. They might have contacted once, but things might happen in their lives that means they're not keeping in touch with their retailers and may be put back on a disconnection path rather than a hardship path. And so we've written to the Minister about that, reminding her about the ESC's actual draft decision on the payment difficulty framework that talked about that there shouldn't be a need for engagement to get assistance, automated assistance, and the benefits of that sort of regime. That said, we have been talking to the networks about their response as well, and two of the energy companies, the energy networks, have confirmed to us that they won't be acting on requests for disconnection from retailers. And if that breaches their regulatory obligations, they'll report it as a breach. So that's good. We are concerned about people who have been disconnected sort of over the last few months, and perhaps still haven't been reconnected. And we're wondering if there's anything from a regulatory perspective can be done for that group to make sure there's some follow-up on those households. There probably isn't a large number, but we're very much aware that there are a number like that. We do hear from people that have been disconnected for months at a time. In the last 12 months, that's been the case. So we're really keen to see if there's some regulatory solution to that. One other sort of interesting thing is with your energy upgrades program, which does rely on a lot of door knockers, one of our colleagues received a door knocker last week. So I'm curious to know whether anything can be done to stop door knockers during this time. People are at home, so maybe there are some people thinking that's a opportunity to door knock people. And I think that's pretty inappropriate given the social distancing requirements got on place. And often those door knocks are really lead generation to sell people other things as well. That's our experience.
On that, Jared, I think that there was, from the 1st of April, that's not allowed, the door knocking. Okay, right. I didn't realise that. So maybe there was a. I think someone will tell me if I'm wrong about that. Yep. But yes, absolutely not. I'll let you keep going.
Oh, sorry. I was going to leave it there and pass it to Jake to see if he had anything else he wanted to add.
No, I think you've covered the main things. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks very much, Jared and Jake. We'll get back to a number of those issues during this discussion, I would have thought. Okay, Financial Counselling Victoria. Do we have Sandy Ross and Lynn Dundon?
Yeah, hi, Kate, and thanks for pulling this together. And I want to acknowledge the comments from the Brotherhood, from Gavin, from Jared. I mean, these are all excellent points that have been made, and I mean, obviously we're deeply concerned about the prospect of disconnections continuing in this current climate. We see policy responses to kind of remove any kind of risk of disconnections is really an imperative. And I think we're, I mean, I'd note Jared's comments about the National Debt Helpline, and I know I've been talking to my interstate colleagues with the other financial counselling state peak bodies, and they're all reporting the same thing, that the calls have dropped off in the last week or two with the National Debt Helpline. There is the sense is it's like a tsunami where the water's gone away from the beach. We're all waiting for it to come rushing back with enormous force. I mean, in our sector, our main focus is on trying to ramp up capacity, anticipating a significant amount of hardship being extremely widespread in the community, and the need for our sector to have the resources to help respond and support people in that context. And there's a whole lot of communications we're having with government, state and federal, really around how to make those sorts of responses. When it comes to the utilities, I think our primary concerns in recent times have really been about the problems with the ERGS system and that not working. And I might defer to Lynn on that, because I know Lynn's been in touch with DHHS recently and is more up to date on some of the detail of what they're doing to deal with those issues.
Thanks, Sandy. Lynn, can you hear us? Yep. Lynn, I can't. There we go. Okay. Yeah, unmuted. Fabulous.
Yes, we've been in discussion with the manager for the ERGS, and so they pay the utility companies weekly, but they've also given them a 3-month advance on their payments, and that's to work to stop the disconnections and the harassments, but that hasn't really changed. And ERGS is a really slow moving beast. The department's 3 months behind in their applications, and they've said if they had another 100 people, they still wouldn't be able to deal with the workload. So it's huge. What we're concerned about is that they seem to be just trying to address the issue as it is, the way it's been going on for many years, and they continue to give money to the utility companies. The utility companies have nothing in their contracts to say they need to do the PD framework at all. It's up to the utility companies to do that, to provide that. Sorry, Sandy, I'm struggling with words because it's not a contractual obligation. It's actually just what the companies would like to do. And we've got financial counsellors now working from home, so they can't fill out those applications or assist people. The companies aren't doing it online, and people that are struggling with literacy. So that's people that don't speak English well, people that can't fill out forms, people that don't speak English as a first language are going to struggle. This online world is not for them, and the companies are not obligated in any way to, with the money that they receive from government, to actually complete the hardship applications, the ERGS. So that's where we're at the moment. Sorry, Sandy, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, look, I think in summary that the ERGS was meant to be reformed, but the reform has fallen over. It's not been adequately resourced by the department, and the department certainly didn't plan for a massive influx of applications in the middle of last year, and now we're seeing just a dreadful situation with a massive backlog and incredibly long delays, creating all sorts of havoc. And ERGS, I think, needs to be urgently repaired. And that's got to come from I think, the ministerial level, the interventions to make that happen.
The department is continuing with its processes, and it does require the minister to intervene. They putting extra people on is actually not going to change the process.
Thanks for those reflections, Sandy and Lynn. Can we move to the Economic Abuse Reference Group? Carolyn, are you there with us? Hi, Carolyn. I can't hear you though.
Carolyn, it looks like you're still on mute on the computer.
I didn't realise I had control. There you go. Hi, everybody.
Oh, good. Hi.
Look, first of all, what we're hearing from the family violence sector is that they're expecting a big increase in family violence, and that's no surprise. But that they've got real challenges in providing their services. First of all, people are at home, and the women and others they're trying to support are often stuck at home with the perpetrator. We're even hearing about the understandable early release from prison, or people being given bail who may not otherwise, and with maybe a day's notice, and support workers are having to do something, especially when that person's been a perpetrator. And of course, providing those services by phone, all sort of big challenges for that sector. As far as the financial issues are concerned, I suspect that that a lot of those issues, the economic abuse issues, are really going to be, we're not going to see them for a while. Perhaps like some other areas, I think this is they are the sort of problems that people don't immediately recognise. But we suspect that things like more financial stress, and therefore, withholding necessary funds from families and children, perhaps the problem we're seeing of people applying for payday loans in their partner's name, those sorts of things when things are financially tight, may increase. And we're also a bit concerned about the early access to superannuation and coercion, perhaps, for some people to apply for early release where it's not really necessary. But look, that's it from us at the moment. I'm really interested to hear what other people are seeing as well.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. We've gone through the 10 organisations now, and that was really, really useful to hear from you some of those themes that are coming through that we can talk about with the questions in a minute. I know we've got observers from the AER, DELP and DTF. I should give you the opportunity, but no pressure. Of course, happy to take some comments, or not at this point, otherwise we can move to the key topics for questions and discussions. Feel free to put your hand up if you want.
Hi Kate, it's Sarah Proudfoot.
Hi Sarah, how you going? All right, if there's no comments from any of the observers, then maybe we'll move on. Jess, I know that you've been taking some notes in the background. Did you want to share your screen or add anything else and see if we need to capture anything else before we move on? Or
yes, for sure. I'll just bring my screen up very quickly. And to let everyone know, what we will also be doing is sort of capturing this in a piece of work. And I think if we have a look, if anyone has, we'll share this afterwards as well if anyone wants to add anything. But I guess some really key themes that we're seeing through are sort of the ergs is certainly an issue, and an issue around disconnections. But yeah, I think that's something we can perhaps draw out in the next discussion.
all right, thanks very much, Jess. Now, we had a list of initial questions. I think Jess is sharing there now. I was going to guide the discussion on a few of these questions and see where the discussion goes. It might need some guiding, or you might not. I think at this point you can probably use your raise hand function if I asked one of the questions, and then we can take everyone one by one. Jess, just on that, how do I see, if the screen's up there, how do I see the raised hands and the participants? Do I?
I think, Kate, you'll be able, if you put your...
there we go. Yep.
Okay,
I'll press it again, it goes over the top. Fabulous, thank you.
No worries.
One of the comments that was made, which I might kick off with just to see if we can discuss that, talked about the engagement level required under the PDF in order to get assistance and protection from disconnection. I know that call volumes, I think someone had said they'd raised more than 100%. I think, Kira, you mentioned that. So there seems to, I'd be interested to hear some of the stories or what you've heard from some of your customers and clients about whether or not there is that difficulty to get access to their retailer, whether that's long call waits. Are there other avenues that they're finding are more productive, like web chat or email or text? I wonder if that we could give a bit of light to the problems with communicating with retailers at a point in time now where core volumes are really high. Would anyone like to kick off some further discussion on that point? I'm looking for hands, but I'm just making sure. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I can see hands. Here we go. This is working. Cynthia, I saw your hand first.
Thanks, Kate. We have customers complaining that they can't get through to their retailers. Even that issue, though, is starting to drop off. That was initially precipitated by the lockdown situation in India and the Philippines. So both large and small retailers have offshore contact centres that they've needed to onshore or set up their people being able to take web chat or phone calls from home. So we're actually seeing that diminishing as an issue for customers who were contacting us originally because they just couldn't get through to their retailers. But it is dropping off as an issue as the businesses are increasing their onshore capability or otherwise building their at-home offshore capability.
Yes, yes. I've heard some of that as well, Cynthia, accords with some of the things I've heard. Thank you. Gerard, I think your hand is raised as well.
Yes, we have also been hearing from people struggling to get through to energy retailers, that some of them have been better at making web access than others, and some of them you know, even issuing directions around don't contact us for some things. So that's happening. We're also concerned about access for people who you know, might require special assistance, whether that's through the interpreter services, for example. I know the TIS surface that a lot of is relied upon is you know, is struggling at the moment. Basically, there's a long wait we're finding for people to get access to interpreters. And I think that's to do both with the telco system in terms of the way that service operates, and also the number of interpreters. And yeah, so I think it's important when we think about this issue around accessing the energy retailer, we have to think about those in those vulnerable circumstances as well.
Just picking up on something you said then, Gerard, is there some retailers providing a different avenue for PDF type inquiries versus other more general inquiries, and is that something that's helping the problem, or something that's siphoning it off to a too hard basket, if you know what I mean?
Look, I don't know how they're interpreting the PDF, but I know some of them do on their websites have, you know, information about email us or chat to us if you want to access assistance.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it seems like there are a lot of things that pick up on concerns that are more immediate, and then there's a feel that there's almost an avalanche or a tsunami of a second tier worth of problems that are more medium and longer term that will then impact quite probably abruptly once this sort of initial period is over. I wondered whether, I think one of the questioners picks up on that theme, Jess and Kat. Maybe we'll go to one of the questions that talks about the second question I'm interested in, and anyone else please take a role as well if it's a particular one you want to talk about. Kira, I think you mentioned some of the key difference and risks for consumers with entrenched vulnerabilities and the difference between customers who are experiencing vulnerability for the first time. What do you think that looks like over the next sort of 2 to 3 months and longer term? I think, Kira, you were saying that newly vulnerable consumers are behaving in a more direct and engaged fashion up front. What are you seeing of the other more entrenched vulnerabilities in the community? Can you give some light to that?
I think to Jared's point and a couple of points in raised today, the problem we have with the I guess those who are more actively participating and the newer people experiencing vulnerability through COVID being more self-advocating is, it means those who have the high level of complexities are the ones who probably aren't getting through. So again, those who are probably higher risk of disconnection and follow-up action at the moment are probably the ones that are having the hardest time getting onto their organisations, because those who can self-advocate and probably also have much greater capabilities around being able to access the web chats and get online and maybe fill out the online information and do those forms for themselves without needing additional support, are doing that, and therefore those who don't have that same capability are probably going to be the ones who are going to be most at risk. If that makes sense. Sorry, someone's clearly delivering something to my door in the middle of this conference, and they're knocking away, even though I'm not answering, so I apologise. I don't have the problem of young kids flying at me, just, you know, random deliveries, really. So I apologise about that. So I might have been slightly distracted in trying to answer that question.
No, that's an interesting reflection. I hadn't thought about those that have already been vulnerable, sort of almost, you know, further down the pecking order of being able to be serviced by their suppliers, because you've got this avalanche of newly vulnerable consumers who are really actively engaging and wanting to hear more, to get some help.
Yeah, so to Jared's point, that's the big risk. I think it's the people who can't, you know, a lot of businesses are saying, yes, if you enter our hardship program, we won't disconnect you, but that doesn't help everyone who can't get through. And, you know, we've been talking about SMS or ways that people can email just in one liner saying, I can't get through, but I'm in trouble, or something, so that they can get captured. I mean, our preference would be no disconnections. The government's saying stay home, and yet we're still not making a mandate that you can't disconnect people. So again, there's slight misnomer there, but yeah, so you know, I think to Jared's point, that's going to be a big problem.
Yes, the other aspect I just wanted to pick up on was the actual operation of PDF obligations at the moment, and some concern that perhaps the payment plans that are being put forth are not something that are practical or reasonable in the circumstances, which, you know, makes you think about whether or not there's a breach of an obligation there that we would be very interested in. I think, Gerard, you were raising that. When you're hearing stories like that, can you just confirm what's the conduit for moving issues like that forward? Are you dealing with EWOV on that, or are you referring that to the Commission?
Maybe Jake can answer that one.
Yeah, on the particular one I can think of that was from a few days ago. I think that person was referred back to the retailer after, with then go to the Ombudsman if there's any issue, and they don't go to that. I think in that actual example, the most concerning thing with those both self-advocating or who have been in long-term vulnerability is that person they actually called us and requested information on accessing their superannuation to pay an unaffordable amount that was being demanded by the retailer. And I think that that'll have a flow-on effect. And speaking to the caseworkers and to our outreach teams, we really need to get to that point where we can confidently say that someone's not going to be disconnected. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to unpack everyone's complex issues that they come to us with, and deal with the energy side of it quickly so that we can move on to other issues.
And I'd just add, Kate, that I think that you're right, that the quality of assistance is really important to focus on as well. I mean, we are concerned about, they might give you a payment moratorium if you get through to them, but are they doing other things that the payment difficulty framework requires, like putting you on a lower rate? You know, otherwise you're just going to get debt at a higher rate. So I think that, you know, I don't know if we've got a lot of evidence around that at the moment, but I think it's something that needs to be kept a close eye on.
Yes, and I mean, and capturing those issues in a way that then we can have visibility of what's going on, and EWOV as well, so that if there are mechanisms we can use to follow up on all of those, so that we can and will. Yeah. I've just had a question, just talking about the focus on energy. But many of those issues we're talking about cut across all the utility sector. Are there any water-specific issues arising? I know that water businesses, and I've written to water businesses and all the energy retailers a couple of weeks ago just to remind them of their regulatory obligations at this time, keep an ongoing dialogue with us if they think there are things they need to be doing for customer outcomes that mean they're not going to meet their obligations, and to sort of send the message that they may well have to go beyond those minimum entitlements in the regulatory framework to provide assistance to customers at the moment. Pleasingly, water businesses had already committed to no restrictions during this time, which is good. I'm interested just to open up that question though, what are the other water specific issues, if at all, that you're seeing? Okay, I think I've, Sandy Ross, you've got your hand up. Can I start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Yeah, no, I've been thinking for a little while, listening to the comments, that there'd be some real value in talking about some public communication, especially around the issue of disconnection. And what I'm thinking is the level of public awareness and debate around tenancy and prevention of evictions, that's kind of maybe where we need to be at around the issue of disconnections. We need to have a really big sort of public push to ensure that there's widespread understanding of the PDF about protection from disconnection.
Certainly, can I assure you many discussions are happening behind the scenes on all of this as well, and I do acknowledge the importance and the role that the regulator does have to put those messages out about what the framework does provide in terms of protections for consumers at a time like this, and that's separate from any other policy discussions that go on, but certainly we've done what we can to date, I think, in energy, and working towards hopefully one in water as well, so that we can be communicating that message to the public about what those protections are. Michelle, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to first of all acknowledge that many people in this group have contributed to our It's Your Energy campaign, which is running right now with a payment difficulties message. So I'd ask everybody, where you can and where appropriate, if you could help amplify that, because that's very much about connecting people with information so that they can understand their rights, connecting them through to the bodies that are represented here today. So thanks for that support in the past, and please continue. It'll be running an extra 2 weeks from now.
Thanks, Michelle. I've got a few more hands up. Kira, you put your hand up again.
Just to note, the ERG issue is definitely, the issue of the ERGs being processed is happening in water as well. And I know that from what I understood from our water colleagues, DHS was saying there was a 4 to 6 month delay in processing ERGs, from what I understand, and they have talked about how to work around that. So I think it was mentioned before from FCVIC around being given advance payments. To our knowledge, that actually hasn't happened. It's a thing that's been put on the table as a possibility. But we've heard that hasn't actually happened. Well, so I'm lip reading as well.
It's happened. They've paid them 3 months in advance.
So definitely not according to our water colleagues, that hasn't happened.
And definitely wasn't discussed. We were discussing this issue earlier today with a number of our senior representatives of scheme participants at our board meeting, and they didn't raise it as an issue either. Because we were obviously, EWOB has significant concerns about the delays that it has, both in terms of for retailers and customers, but what that will mean for us in the longer term. And we had both consumer and industry, and nobody raised any understanding or acknowledgement that had actually occurred.
The department's preparing its media release today or early next week, but they've paid the energy retailers 3 months in advance, and they're looking for no disconnections and no harassments, but at the same time there's no compulsion on them to actually fill out the ERGs applications. Can I just also suggest that your communication needs to go through SBS and community radio, because there are a lot of people that just don't understand, and it needs to be in plain English, that don't understand English. So it's really important that we get the messages out far and wide. And SBS has about 60 languages that it's translated now into the COVID-19. So it's very reputable in its service.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Gavin, you've had your hand up for a little while too. Did you want to add something to the discussion?
Yeah, just probably more looking at the medium term. A lot of the conversation here is prefaced on current capabilities and current resilience, both within the community sector and within the community. I can pretty well guarantee by the time you come out of this and governments have a look at their budgets and organisations refine their financial position, that you won't have the same sort of resilience within the community sector and the other supports at the moment. And also you're going to have higher demand and people that have never engaged with any of this stuff before coming in flying blind. So I think there's a really big piece there around education and simplicity, so people can get what they want and not have to go through third parties, because there's going to be, A, they don't want to because I don't know who the third parties are, but B, there won't be as many third parties when you look at the spend that's out there. And I think that we need to think about the medium term, not just about the crisis that we're talking about now. It's the other side where the real problems start to appear. We're all locked up, packed up, loved up at the moment, lots of money, but yeah, that's all.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Who's still got their hand up that wants their hand up? I've got Gerard, is your hand up again?
Yes, I was just going to respond to your question about water, Kate.
Yes.
It's really good to hear the water retailers not restricting. I just, while we were here, went online to our database and had a search of water issues. And not a lot, we get much less water issues than energy issues, but there is a couple around external debt collectors acting on behalf of water retailers. So I'm just curious to understand whether, you know, anything could be done to look at water retailers' use of external debt collectors. That's just in the last few days. There seem to be calls related to that.
Right. Okay. Thanks for the heads up on that one. Cynthia, I'm not sure whether EWOLF would have heard those themes as well, but we'll keep a dialogue about that. Yep. Sandy and Lynn, you still have your hand up. Did you have your hand up again, or do you want to put your hand down? All good. All good. I wonder. Oh yes, I've got a question here from Emma. Hi, Emma. You've got a question about retailer treatment of job seeker boost. Yes, we have time.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I was just wondering if anyone in frontline service roles have heard anything or others about how retailers are planning to treat this boost. I'm just conscious that particularly for people who already have large existing debts, are retailers planning to I guess, remove some autonomy from people in terms of how they use that job seeker boost to cover existing debts. And I guess to, you know, under the PDF, there's significant autonomy to, you know, propose the payment plan that works for you. Are retailers perhaps, you know, overstepping the mark because there has been that boost to the job seeker payment? But any thoughts on that would be welcome.
I'll open that up to the floor. Cynthia, is your hand up?
I think it's a bit early to tell because the payments haven't been received yet. Yeah, but I think it's definitely a risk that we might see businesses collecting debt from people who were previously just on Newstart asking for more. That's right.
It's Sarah from the AER. I know in some of our discussions with EWON, the New South Wales Ombudsman, they mentioned last time around with stimulus payments, retailers were sort of putting pressure on customers to use those payments to pay down debt. And they were quite concerned that a similar practice could emerge
right
at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I wonder if I might throw the floor open to my co-commissioners. Simon, Satish and Rebecca are listening in today as well. Are there any particular questions or themes you'd like to hear a little bit more about? I can see a hand up. Hi, Simon. Go for it. You just need to unmute yourself first.
Unmute. Okay.
There we go.
I was wondering, in the run up to winter, where people's gas bills in particular are likely to surge, it's going to be even more important that vulnerable consumers are on the best rates possible. And we know that some consumers are not on very good gas rates. And is there anything that can be done to encourage them to move to better rates before they get into financial difficulty? I mean, try and get ahead of the problems, because once they go into the PDF, then they get on better rates, but by that stage they've accrued a high debt and all that sort of thing. So is there anything people think that can be done to try and encourage people, particularly in the gas sector as we approach winter?
Thanks, Simon. I see Lauren's got her hand up. Lauren, did you want to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Thanks, Simon. Just to give you a bit more context, so Carl in my team and Cam have kind of been out working with the emergency relief agencies over the last 18 months to get really simple information about how to get onto obviously the best offer, but also save, energy money, get on the concessions, access payment difficulty support. And those materials were co-designed with the community sector, but also with vulnerable people, so that we were making sure that the messaging was simple and was tailored. Over the next 6 months, they're rolling out that now through online delivery for obvious reasons, and having video explainers that can be provided to both the community sector and to consumers who are trying to get onto better offers and access those concessions. The CALD component of that program will focus on the Vietnamese and Iraqi-born Arabic-speaking communities, because our research found that they were two of the CALD group that were, I guess, most overexposed in terms of energy poverty in Victoria. And so we're working with community leaders within those cultures right now to make sure, again, that the information is tailored and targeted and directed to those people that need it at the right time. So we'd be happy to kind of continue those discussions with others if people are interested in kind of how to strengthen that support network that's been developed through that program. It is supposed to be obviously quite preventative, so that if people are empowered with the right information that's meaningful, that enables them to take action, that hopefully prevent some of that kind of, I guess, escalation of issues. But that also is obviously dependent on retailer behaviour, and that's obviously what a lot of people have raised concerned about. So we can tell people to go and access these things, but there also needs to be kind of a hawk eye on whether or not they're actually getting the access to the things they've got a right to.
Thank you, Lauren. That's really interesting.
Jake, I think you had your hand up too. Were you going to respond to Simon's question?
Yeah, just echoing what Lauren just said about ensuring retailers are actually delivering those PDF requirements. I have often seen people on payment plans below their usage where they don't recall having a tariff review. And we have seen people with payment plans with 44 cent, 50 cent kilowatt hour rates that they're paying, just off the top of my head. So I'd just stress if the Commission can ensure things like stimulus payments aren't being wasted and debts being accrued on that level.
Simon, Hugh here from the Victorian Chamber. It might not be an immediate response, but I'm just wondering if any consideration's been given to using the default energy offer framework to extend that to gas as well as electricity.
Thanks, Hugh. That's something that's been on the radar for a little while, but and I'm sure we'll come back on in due course. But yes, something that we've been applying our mind to for a while, but don't have the remit for at the moment. But yes.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks, Jake. Satish, did I see your hand up? Did you want to raise a question?
Thanks, Kate. Yes. With a slightly different topic, so if you wanted to finish off on all of that sort of stuff, please
Sure.
go ahead.
Maybe I'll just check if anyone else had any other comments to make on Simon's question. I think there was one other hand. Let me just check. Jared, did you have a different question, or were you responding to Simon's?
Thanks, Kate. Just was responding to Simon's and following on from what Jake is flagging. This is an opportunity for the retailers to demonstrate a good response to the trust issues in the market and in the industry by being proactive and not waiting for a review or not waiting for a prompt. Anything that helps them see this as an opportunity to build trust by getting ahead of people's inappropriate rates, recognizing that's on their bills already. You may not be on the best offer, but if there's a trust issue, that prevents people taking up that opportunity for a conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that comment, Jared. Can I move to Satish then?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I certainly agree with everything people have said about the preventative measures. Obviously, that's going to be better than any cure that we might be able to come up with. But for my part, and I think people will understand where I come at from this issue, unfortunately, with the best will in the world, I suspect that there's going to be some difficulties down the line, which may require the Commission to contemplate and using its enforcement tools to the extent that it can. And I'm just wanting to ask questions of the community groups that are here for the same reasons that you've just been indicating about the difficulties that vulnerable people have in accessing retailers and filling in forms and all the rest of it. For those same reasons, regulators and enforcers have difficulty getting evidence for use in court. And I'm just wondering, when people are complaining to you guys in the community centres, what scope there might be to assist ESC in terms of collecting or assisting those vulnerable people in collecting evidence for us or for potential use subsequently. So whilst things are actually happening, to be able to document letters that may have been received, or to capture SMSs, somehow to advise them to keep a hold of the letters that they've received, anything that might give us the actual access to the facts and the primary documents or primary information or source materials is obviously going to be hugely important for us if we have to contemplate actual enforcement proceedings, especially through litigation. I was just wondering if any of the community groups might be able to comment on any scope that they may have or ideas they may have in dealing with consumers who are vulnerable, in terms of how at the time, rather than us as a regulator coming onto the scene after the event, how at the time we might be able to encourage people to capture and keep aside some of that primary source or evidentiary material.
Satish, it's Jared here. I might have a go at answering that. We at Consumer Action do try and obtain evidence from clients and share it with regulators through complaints regularly. We do, like you do, have difficult, as primarily a phone-based provider, and most people that are calling us around energy issues, that's through our financial counselling service. We're not necessarily getting, it's difficult sometimes to get, the written documentation from clients. So it's not that we don't try, we do. We try and talk to our financial counsellors about how they can get that, and Jake does a lot of work in that area as well to try and collect that evidence, but it can be quite a challenge. The other thing that we have done with other regulators is when there are actions taken on behalf of vulnerable witnesses, we can sort of assist the witness, a bit being, where they've still got other issues that they need legal assistance or financial counselling, or to help them link into other community supports, and sort of be someone that can, be on their side as that they go through that quite unfamiliar process of being a witness in a regulatory action. That's something we have tried to do in the past.
Thanks, Jared. I've got a couple of hands up. I'm wondering if they're responding to Satish. Gavin, did you have something to respond to Satish on?
Yeah, I do. Look, we have about 110,000 visits, as we call it, or outreach across Victoria each year. All of those are documented. Yes, we do cite bills, and we do repeats as well, often repeats back to those households. What we would require in that is we would require some sort of guidance from the ESC about what data you want us to collect and how to do it, because we collect it all. It's just what's important to you. The other thing I would say in that is, because we have our own resources, we try to resolve the situation rather than collect non-compliance. So we'll try and muscle our way through to get an outcome, rather than go the regulatory line, if that makes sense. So we try and fix it and pay the bill and just get it sorted. But if you want that, you would need to give us something that we could then use as a template to be clear about what data you want and what's important and what's not important, because we're dealing with lots of other things at the same time.
Yeah, can I just respond to that and say, yeah, we're happy to engage, Gavin, with the sector in trying to provide some guidance and templates and things of that kind. So that might be some. Thank you very much for that feedback. Very happy to engage with you further on that issue. And likewise, Jared, thank you for your approaches and endeavours to get evidence and pass it on through to the regulators.
Thanks, Satish and Gavin and Jared. Interesting conversation. I've just got a hand up from Rebecca Billings. Rebecca, was there something you wanted to raise?
Hi all, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. Key question for me is really crystal ball gazing, I guess, but a lot of you have been talking about the calm before the storm, and I'm just wondering when people are thinking that the storm will hit. Particularly given the delay in the job seeker payments coming through. Do we think that that delay is going to exacerbate things, or do you think that there's sufficient time lag between people energy bills being due and debts accruing?
Gavin, is you no?
Just on that
hand or no?
No, just on that one, I think there's multiple issues you're dealing with here. We're starting to pick up now. People are getting distressed now because they've just realised this is forever. So you've got this emotional, psychological issues that are piping up now. So you're going to have different types of distress along the way, and because of that different type of distress, you're going to get different interactions with the energy retailers and the water retailers. So frustration, all that sort of stuff. And then when the JobKeeper rolls off and they halve the dole and the pension concession payments in 6 months' time, if those jobs aren't there, there's going to be a financial train wreck after a whole lot of emotional, psychological disturbance. So I'd look at it as different transitions with different pressure points, not just financial. The financial stuff seems to be okay from a domestic household point of view. From a business point of view, it's not okay at all. I mean, our business is struggling with that a lot, and the cash flow staff seeking finance and all those sorts of things. But from a household point of view, things seem to be, and it's expressed in all the demand dropping off that we've all got.
Thanks, Gavin. I've got a couple more hands up, and I'm looking at the time, and I'm conscious that everybody's got lots of other things on their plate, and I've got a little bit to say at the end. So maybe I'll just check in with Kira. I think your hand's still up. You're probably the last hand.
I was quickly just going to say, we're hearing April, May is going to be a massive issue for the smaller businesses who are with the JobKeeper, I think to Gav's what we call JobKeeper program. There's a whole lot of businesses. It assumes that people have actually got enough money. So you might have 3 part-time staff that you currently pay $200 a week. You're now supposed to come up with $4,500 a fortnight to pay for those people before you've been approved, and you don't get reimbursed until May. And so there's a number of much smaller businesses who do not have the capacity to do that, saying, well, what if do we have to get out a loan, and then what if we don't get approved, and then we've paid our staff this JobKeeper program. So what we're hearing is that for the small business, April, May is going to be a really, really complex, and April to crossover May is going to be a really complex time. And it's probably those smaller businesses who are really just, mum and papa businesses who are going to be even further disadvantaged in waiting for those payments to come back from government. So that's what we're hearing from really small businesses at the moment.
Thanks, Kira. Lauren, did you just want to say something? No? Got hands. I think all my hands are gone, which is...
Oh, sorry, Kate. Only really briefly just to add to that, just in terms of thinking through the vulnerability response, what we do know is obviously when small businesses go under, it flows, so if you've got small business customer issues at the front end, you're then going to have the vulnerable consumers at the back end after the small businesses have gone under. So the two are directly linked. So I just think thinking kind of through that strategy from a regulator's perspective and a policymaker's perspective is quite important. So yes, you're dealing with 2 different customer groups, but they're the same people. It's just different, classifications.
Thanks, Lauren. I think we might bring the discussion to a close, but I think we could probably talk for another 2 hours by the sounds of it. But that was a very useful discussion just to understand what you're seeing on the ground. Obviously, ensuring customer outcomes is central to the Commission's role and many of your roles as well. So I think in this way we've been able to have a discussion that even though we might not have all of the answers right now or the regulatory solutions in place or the levers that we can pull unilaterally, I think this has been a very useful first step to actually understand what the problems that you are seeing, what are the challenges out there, and in what time frame, so that we can start to collaborate more and think about what we can hopefully put in place to protect consumers. So on that note, as I said today at the beginning of the session, your insights about what's happening on the ground are critical to our work at the Commission, and we really would like this session today to be the first in a series, if that's possible, just so that as this crisis unfolds we can keep having a check-in to understand where things are sitting and what new or other challenges are arising. So just to finish today, I'd like to check in with you about how you'd like to engage with the Commission over the next weeks and months as all of this unfolds. Jess and Kat online here are our key conduits for insights and advice on consumers experiencing vulnerability at the Commission. So Jess, did you want to make any comments briefly, or Kat, about your work on the long-term vulnerability project at this point? Did you want to just make yourself known and just say a few words?
Yes, thanks, Kate. Very, very briefly, because I'm conscious of time. So Kat and I had been working on a longer term project, and we've spoken with many of you over the last couple of months. We're really considering, I guess, the urgent focus now. So we're kind of, as Kate said, acting as a key conduit. So we're really keen to look at how we can keep up regular engagement with you and your teams over the coming weeks and months. We're looking at providing advice internally and, I guess, supporting capability across our functions in the Commission. So really thinking about that from a strategic perspective. So keen to talk to people in your teams and how we might do that regularly. And then I think Kate wanted to have a conversation about, at this level, how we kind of keep this engagement up as well. So really appreciate your time today as well. I know it was really late notice, so thank you.
Thanks Jess and Kat. So in terms of these meetings, we think it might be useful to continue to hold them regularly, perhaps every 2 weeks, but I'm open to suggestions because I know everybody is working around the clock at the moment to keep up with current challenges. How would that suit everyone? Does anyone have any feedback about what that might look like, or at what level? What would be useful to keep this conversation going? You can either put your hand up now, or you can feed those thoughts back to Kat and Jess in due course if that's an easier way to do that. But I just wanted to flag that this wasn't just a once-off. I think there'd be value to Commission to continue to collaborate and engage with all of your organisations on an ongoing basis. I'm not seeing hands, so maybe I'll just, given the time, can I let all of your organisations feed that back through to Jess and Kat in due course after you've had a bit of a think about what that might look like. So on that note, I think I'll bring today's roundtable to a close. There was something I needed to.
I can probably jump in, Kate, if you like. It was just to let everyone know that we've taken a few photos from the discussion today, so we may use that in our online article and things. So if there's any issues with that, please let us know. And just in the chat function on the side, I've noticed Michelle's just put her email address if you need the It's Your Energy social media information. Please feel free to get in touch with her, and we'll put that in our wrap-up email to you all as well.
That's great, thank you, Jess. And we'll be writing up some of the key themes from today's discussion to share as well. So feel free to reach out to Kat and Jess with anything else. So I'll leave you now, but can I just thank you all for so promptly responding to our request at short notice to come and have this conversation with us. Thank you for your valued contribution and your insights. Just allows Commission and Commissioners to have a real visibility of what's actually going on in a practical sense. So we don't want to operate in a silo. We want to keep having the conversation with you. So hopefully we'll be able to talk with you again soon. Everybody enjoy hopefully some sense of a long weekend. Stay well and take care. Thanks very much.